Welcome to Quilting's first reality show, live and unscripted with Susan Smith.
Hello and welcome. I'm Susan Smith here in my studio, Stitched by Susan. And this is a brand new live and unscripted episode. I've been away from home for a couple of months, so there's been a bit of a hiatus. So welcome back to those of you who are loyal viewers. And if you're new, generally these live and unscripted episodes are aired the first and third Friday of every month. And it's basically me live streaming the quilting on a project, real time, no edits. So you get to see the oopses, you get to see the decisions as they're being made on the fly, and you get to see my process in real time. So a really warm welcome to all of you who are here. It's just so special to see people chiming in from really all over the world that are interested in my style of sort of freestyling, freehand quilting. So I appreciate you showing up. A couple things are on the docket today. I have a brand new longarm machine, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And we also have some new studio equipment, so we're going to talk a bit about that too. And Dave's got a treat. He's got a camera on himself, so you'll get to see that in just a moment. Oh, look, you get to see it right now. There's Dave. So, it feels like when we began live streaming, when I thought about it initially, I'm like, no biggie, just kind of point a camera or maybe two cameras at the machine and just live stream. But actually, you saw in Dave's photo, it's a pretty big production. And he's very good at that side of things. I'm not. So let's talk about the machine for a minute, and then let's talk about his equipment for a minute, and then we'll kind of get at quilting. So yes, my new machine is named Stella. She's a Bernina Q24. I have a 12-foot frame and a 24-inch, that's what the 24 stands for in the name, throat space. So this has been a learning curve for me, for sure. Dave and I opted to set it up ourselves so that we could get really acquainted with the equipment and how it all came together and what our kind of options are for things like the height of the machine or its placement in the room. So we opted to do all of that ourselves. It took us about 8 hours to set up frame and machine together. And then I do have the Qmatic, which is the digitized computer system. That's kind of outside of my wheelhouse, so it is set up, and I honestly haven't used it yet. So that will be coming later as I get into that learning curve. Other things, and I knew it would be different, switching brand, but there are some other things that I knew would come, this kind of rewiring of my brain a little bit. So just a couple of them that I'll highlight for you, as it might interest you. One of them is that my gamble machine, you get so familiar with the shape of your machine. So think of it under the quilt, the width of it, the length of it, how far back you can quilt, how far forward you can quilt. All of those things you just kind of know after many times of using it. This machine is a little different. The nose is a little wider, so I maybe can't go quite as close to my edge clamp, but it is shorter in front of the needle. I can quilt up really close to me in the front, which I love. So there's just these differences to get used to. The feel of quilting was not much different. Because I quilt freehand, I often quilt with one hand guiding. And so the feel of the machine, it's a similar weight because it's a similar size. That was not really a problem. It's the little mechanical things. So I was joking on social media that I used to have the one stitch or the lock stitch for pulling up the bobbin thread I did with my left thumb. And of course, that's a motion that I repeat over and over and over and over, and it's just so automatic I don't think about it. Well, this time I have programmable, I have 4 different sort of a top and bottom on each handlebar that I can program. So thinking through what those are and which ones I want to stay in place all the time and where I think it's best to use them, I decided that I was going to do this, pull the bobbin thread up with my right thumb. So it's just funny. Like still, I've done quite a few quilts already, I think 7 projects, but still, I go to do it with my left thumb and I have to think about it every time. So today I'll probably do a little less talking because I have to do a little more thinking. Some of these things that used to be so automatic, I now have to think about a wee bit. Okay, so that's kind of the new machine, and I'm sure I'll be talking more about it as time goes on, but she sews like a dream. That was, it's Swiss engineering for sure, comes into play here. In the process of setting up, you just never know. Sometimes you have trouble, the table's not perfectly level, or for whatever reason, things don't go smoothly and you have to troubleshoot and adjust and troubleshoot and adjust until you get things running. But in our case, though it was a time-consuming process, we just went through everything step by step by step, and when we got the machine loaded and ready to stitch, it was great. Away we went, and we were able to just start sewing. Now, I did have a little trouble with the threading. And see, this is just me. I was trying to take the first stitches and do the first row of stitching, and I just couldn't get that form to stitch correctly. And so what I finally did was call a friend who has a Bernina sit-down machine. And she was able to just talk me through, have you done this? Does your threading look like this? We sent a few photographs back and forth. And it was my mistake, literally my mistake. But as soon as I got that figured out, away we went. And the stitch formation is lovely. It's going fairly smoothly overall. Okay, for other new equipment, because we don't do things by halves here at Stitched by Susan. Also, while I was away on holidays, that Dave, he went crazy, Mr. Producer, and he replaced our cameras. So up till this time, we've been filming entirely with iPhones. A couple of you have been gracious enough. I think we had 1 or 2 sent to us, and we've just used our older models of phones, and that's what we've filmed with. Though these many episodes. Anyway, he went and bought 2 really nice cameras and had these all installed when I came home. So today, you can see some of them. I don't know if you can even figure out where they are in all that stuff, can you? There's one, he's pointing, and the other one's off screen. Oh, there it is. I was thinking it was on my other side. Okay, you see the 2 new cameras. Do you know, they're not that big. They shouldn't be that intimidating, but apparently they are, at least to me. So I'm very grateful that Dave takes up that side of the business, because that is not my strong suit. But the beauty of it is, do you want to change camera scene, babe? The beauty of it is that now there's more clarity in the pictures, and the lighting, I think, will be much better. iPhones just have limitations in terms of how the lighting adjusts, like when I move out of the center of the picture and things like that. I won't bore you with all the details, but there are a lot of benefits to having for reals cameras. And so we do have a couple of those now. So all that to say, this morning is the inaugural run with them. And so we'd love some feedback on what you think of the angles, even what you think of the lighting, but more the viewing. Like, is the camera angle when I have the close-up on the machine stitching, is that going to be good for you today? Do we need to make some adjustments to that? So all of this is new. A lot of this filming is new. And so we've done our own sort of test runs, but this is the first time live. So lots of good things going on. On the heels of that, I do want to say, too, a huge thank you. Since very early on, I have used the platform buymeacoffee.com for support, offering that to you all as a way if you wanted to support this channel. And we have always taken all the dollars that come from that and invested it into new equipment. We got Dave a rolling desk with monitors and things like that. And now the cameras too came from that. So a huge thank you to you all. So there are a couple of ways actually to support me now. And one is buymeacoffee.com. That's the easiest and the sort of lowest threshold. You can do a donation as little as $5. And if you choose, you can do a monthly commitment. Or in the fall, I also launched a membership. So if you're a quilter and you want to be getting a little more detailed lessons than I provide in these live and unscripted episodes, but still in small and digestible amounts, this membership offers 2 new lessons each month. Each one is entirely freestanding. It might be a guest speaker. It might be a new freehand design. It might be a question and answer session. There's a number of things. It is called Advance. I don't yet have it easy to find on my website. So there's 2 ways, if you're interested in that you can find me. And it is a subscription membership. So you can either go to my Instagram account, and in my bio, it's right at the top. And you can read information about it, more details about it. I won't go into a lot today, and where you can purchase that. Or you can email me, info@stitchedbysusan.com, for some more details on that. So in the meantime, if you're enjoying this, and I haven't even got to the quilting yet, but if you're enjoying this, please do hit the like and subscribe buttons. And if you want notifications when I go live, then also click the bell, and YouTube will let you know whenever I am live. So typically first and third Friday of every month. Have I covered most of the basics, Dave? I want to get to the quilting.
Yeah, we just have a question on...
Apparently there's some questions coming. Okay, someone's asking about the lighting, so let's have a peek at that, and we'll chat about that a little bit. Okay, there are a few questions coming in about the mechanics of the roller bar and things like that. I'll try and talk about them as I go. I purposely chose a smaller project today. I do want to show you the quilting, but I knew that I would be chattering, and I don't know that I can do both very well yet. So I purposely chose a smaller project. So you're seeing the light. There's one up here. There's one way down at that end. Those are a Irregular light. What else do I want to say about them, Dave? They're LED lights. And this is a test run. First time we've used these as well. Fully adjustable. They're LED, so you can adjust how bright and not. You can adjust, the full range of color, yellow to blue to pink, etc. So that's what those are. Mr. Producer's just scrolling through the questions. I'm going to get a sip and soothe my throat. I've had a bit of a flu this week, and I will try really hard not to cough into the microphone. Okay, Christine is commenting, I see it's already loaded. I wanted to see how you did it with the roller bar. That's a great question, Christine, because in a lot of my past episodes, I have focused on my process of loading, which has some shortcuts in it and is really speedy with the red snapper system. I'll be 100% honest, I haven't figured out a great way yet on the new machine. So I'm experimenting with it. I'm experimenting with how my leaders are attached, and what order I load my quilt in, front first, back first, whether I lay it on the table, whether I do it over the bar. So that's why I preloaded this one. It's still a bit awkward. As I streamline that system, I will show that again. And honestly, if any of you who have a machine that's got a dead bar like this one does, you can't really see it, but it's right. My quilt goes under it and then wraps around the take-up bar. If any of you have that type of setup, I'd love to have some photographs and some ideas on how you've dealt with that. We're looking at different things. We're loading at putting a spring on that dead bar where it can be lifted out of the way. It's hard to show you a lot of the details because you can't really see it well on camera either, but let's just say I haven't got that perfectly worked out yet. It's still a little bit laborious, so that's a thing I'm going to work through as the quilts go by. Mr. Producer's telling me bonus points if I can read this one because, of course, it's in Spanish. Well, I see that she's in Mexico, and it's happy. Yes, Happy New Year. There we go. We figured it out. Okay, you guys, let's get quilting. Please keep sending in your questions. I'll get on camera for half a second again. Please keep sending in your questions as I quilt because I will pause a time or two and answer more of them. They could be about the quilting. They can be about the machine. I don't know that I'm qualified to answer them yet about the machine, but I'll do my best, and I'll certainly be honest about what my experience has been so far. But let's get started quilting. One of the fun things that this machine has is a really a basting stitch that I really like. So in the past, again, and if you haven't watched before, I don't want to repeat myself too much. But in the past, I have typically just used my regular stitch length to do the basting because it was faster than changing back and forth between. It's really easy to change on this one, and I like the basting stitch. So that's what I've been doing. Again, I'll experiment with this. Like, nothing is set in stone yet. And see, I was talking and I took 2 stitches instead of 1. So you guys, I might have to stop talking while I quilt. But let's get this basted. I've got basting turned on, yep. I've got my right thumb at work, and I've got a thread knot. Okay, see, this is the reality show part because I took those 2 stitches. So let's just clear that all out and start from fresh. Another thing that I don't have yet is my handy little tool holder that I used to have in a cup on the top of my machine. I haven't decided exactly where I want that to be yet. So these are the things that will come as I quilt more and more. And I'll decide where that's most pleasing to have, most efficient. So I am simply basting the outer perimeter of this quilt, and I'm staying well within the 1/4 inch seam allowance, so this does not have to be undone afterwards. It can just fall right within the binding of the quilt. I do not have magnetic channel locks like I used to have, and so I've just eyeballed the top of my quilt. You can kind of see my fingers. I've just eyeballed the top line of my quilt is straight relative to my red snappers. So I'm using that for my guideline, but I do not have a channel lock on at this moment. And it seems to be working fine. As I said, I've done 6 or 7 projects this week. So I'm getting the hang of the new apparatus. To me, basting is a really critical part because it establishes the squareness of your project. You can see this one has quite a lot of seams running along this outer edge, and so it's important that I don't let the hopper foot push those ahead or it's going to skew my quilt. So I laid it out. Batting's a little bit sticky, right? That's why we use it for design walls. But I laid my quilt out on the batting and got it flat and square. And now I want to make sure it doesn't shift. So I'm just going slow and using my fingers to control it. Okay, 1 second. Mr. Producer, I've got resistance definitely happening as I move right. We're just doing a little troubleshooting here, which you can't see on camera. I'm going to keep stitching and see what you see there, okay? Okay. Yes. No. Just 1 second, guys. You cannot see this off camera, but I'm actually, I'm chuckling. Dave, you kind of can see right up here above me, the one light that we were looking at, Dave hung last night after we were trial running, and it's in the way. So, pardon us while I did tell you it's a reality show, didn't I? So the light's going to go off for a minute and we're going to shift things around a little bit. This is kind of how it goes. You try really hard to think of everything and you try and do trial runs and then you troubleshoot and adjust. And I didn't have the actual quilted project on last night. I just had the backing on. And so we didn't correctly account for that. But we'll get it together. So I'm going to keep stitching. Lighting levels may change as he's fiddling with that, but let's keep stitching. And again, I'm just using my fingers to make sure that particularly those seams don't run out ahead. And can you see my hand in behind here? When I see this is wanting to push out in front, I'm just tugging on the edge back here that's already been stitched. And that just pulls it under the needle just a fraction more quickly, and that's perfect. I'm not going to be able to get quite to the front edge and I'll have to advance the quilt. But you know what? I can. See, I surprised myself there. I'm trying to get used to how close to the front edge I actually can quilt. This is awesome. My whole runner is on in one pass. This pretty little table runner belongs to my friend Erin. She became a friend through quilting. I don't know the name of the pattern, but those of you who are piecers, I bet will be watching closely because you can see that it is a, you know what we call the disappearing 4 patch or disappearing 9 patch? It's something like that. There's a pieced block and then it's cut in half and then it's put back together in a way I've never seen because you can see the triangles. So I'll let you puzzle that out as I sew. How does that sound? And here again, I'm grasping the part that's already been stitched and just pulling it under the needle just a bit more quickly, and that takes up that little buckle that I had going on there. And there we are. We've basted the perimeter. It looks very red, the lighting at the moment. How's lighting for you guys? Maybe a couple of you chime in because we I'm looking at a monitor that has, I'm seeing what's going out, but it always tends to look red for me. So if a few of you chime in, like what it's generally looking like at your end, that can be very helpful. Because you know how every monitor reads just a little bit differently. And I'm just going to advance the quilt a tiny, tiny hair. Just like so. Okay, we are ready to stitch. Are there any questions about the basting? I don't think I can underline strongly enough how important I feel like basting is. I baste the perimeter of every single project that I quilt. And if it was a larger quilt and I was floating the top, I would just be basting, the initial 3 sides and then anchoring this front. And then I would keep basting as I worked down the quilt. I don't think this is a shortcut you can take. And you might know me, I am about shortcuts, but only insofar as it maintains my standard of excellence. So this to me is not a shortcut I can take. The basting is critical because it establishes square corners, flat quilt. It allows you, if you need easing to be taken up, to do it initially and not to get ugly surprises when fabric ends up in one corner and you're forced to take pleats. So basting can head off a lot of those problems at the pass. Okay, any questions about the basting, Dave, before I go on? Okay, so someone is asking about side clamps. This is just born of experience. There's quite a lot of fabric on both sides of my runner, and it's also a fairly small project. So the truth is I could put side clamps on, but when I put a little tension on that side, it makes almost no difference. So I feel like that's a shortcut I can take. I certainly could put side clamps on. If you feel better about them, I'll put them on. Here's one for you. Maybe I better put my snapper on. You guys love to see my snappers, don't you? My handy dandy red snapper type. I do love these, and what I love about them is how long they are. So when I am doing a whole quilt, where it might want to sag in a little bit here in the middle, I love that it puts even tension all the way along. So let's use them. That's what they're there for. Have I totally confused anybody yet? This is another thing about Susan. I change my mind quickly. But yes, these side clamps are a beautiful thing. They are the Red Snapper brand, but any brand that has this length to them that holds your entire pass evenly, to me, fits the bill. Okay, any more questions coming in, Mr. Producer? Let's see. What are the red laser lights by the needle for? That's a great question. This is something I've been playing with too. They are shining up from the bottom, and they are the stitch regulator sensors. So it's not something that I can turn off when I'm in regulated mode. So after I get going today, I'm actually going to turn it into manual mode, meaning I'm setting the pace at which the needle is moving, but those sensors then are not used, and it turns the red lights off. I know they're distracting to watch. That's a balance I'll have to find, because there are times on these episodes when I do want the stitch regulator to be on. So we're going to play with lighting to try and get the best view for you possible, but that's what those red laser lights are. Which bar is your backing attached to in the front? It is currently, you can kind of see down here, this is actually the bar that is for the top of the quilt, and I'm using it for the backing. This top bar is listed as the backing bar. But the reason I changed that, and this is part of my experimentation in the loading process, but this one I was confident about. If you roll your backing onto this bar, you get multiple rolls of fabric, right? The bigger the quilt, the bigger the roll. And one of my favorite tools is a magnetic bar to stabilize this front edge of the quilt. And as you can imagine, if there's multiple layers of roll, that magnet won't hold. So I already knew I just want this one layer of the quilt passing over this bar. And I float my tops, so I don't need the top bar to load my tops. So that's my personal preference. That's how I love to load quilts. So floating a top means that this part of the quilt, when it's a bigger one, just hangs, just floats. and I just quilt it as it rises onto the quilting space. So I have loaded my backing onto the lower bar. So it passes over and gets loaded on the lower one. Make sense? Patricia, which foot are you using? I believe the number is 72S. So it's actually the ruler foot, and the S means it's got a slit in the side so I can pull the thread under it without having to feed it through. So I like that. There are several feet that I could be using, but that's the one I chose. Diane, note the automatic presser foot. Yes. And the needle threader. Yes. True. There is a needle threader. You know, again, personal preference. I find it faster to just thread my needle than to use the threader. But it's nice that it's there. And maybe if you're using different types of threads, or maybe if your eyesight's not as grand, it is right there. It's built in. And it's very helpful. That's it.
No more suggestions on the lighting, and they would like you to try with the headlamp and see if that makes it a little less red. Do you want to give that a whirl and see what it looks like on the camera?
Okay, so there's questions apparently about the lighting, and some of you are suggesting that we try a headlamp. I'm pretty confident in this, but I'll try it for you guys. When I have the headlamp on, it glares really badly. So let me just see here. Do you see what I'm saying? You get that shine, and it's going to be pretty difficult to see stitching. Dave, mute for a second, please. Sorry about that, folks. I just had to get a cough out. Well, we can certainly try this. This will lower the brightness of those red laser lights when they're on too. So that might help. I'm certainly willing to try. How does this work if I just dim it a little? That's at 50%. That's as low as I can go. Let's give that a try. All right. I'll take questions, sure. You guys are wondering by now if I'm ever getting to the quilting. Susan's asking, what size basting stitch, how do you decide? So I have options, 1 inch, 1/2 inch, and 1/4 inch. I chose the 1/4 inch because then if they're too long, it's hard to move your machine at the right pace so the needle doesn't like kind of yank on the fabric. Does that make sense? The 1/4 inch works well. You can just move smoothly along. I don't think there's a right or a wrong one. I prefer a little shorter also because it helps me if I'm trying to ease in fullness. Jane, does it stop sewing when the bobbin runs out? Oh, you guys have so many good questions. This is something new to me on this machine. Which camera am I on, hon? The side one. I'm able to load into the machine how many yards of thread are on my bobbin, and I can, at any time, I can look and see what percentage is left on the bobbin, and it stops sewing when the sensor says the bobbin has run out, which I'm going to have to get used to because, again, those of you who know me know I usually just sew until it does run out and then I put a new one on. So that takes getting used to in this way. I have to remember when I change out thread or put in a new bobbin to tell it how much is in there. Is it 3/4 full? Is it 25% full or whatever, so that it knows when to do that. If I just keep putting bobbins in, all of a sudden the sensor says, whoop, you've used your 200 yards, you're done, and it stops. So something that takes getting used to. They do have a very generous bobbin and holds lots of thread. Gabrielle, I have a hard time with my red snapper side clamps. They're so hard to close and they slide off the fabric. Am I doing something wrong, or will it just take them a minute to get broken in? The hard to close will get easier with use. If the fabric is sliding out, I can almost guarantee you're not getting it in the right slot, because that does not happen to me. So when you look at it when it's open, there's a little 1/8 inch groove that's open, and that's what you've got to get your fabric in. So sometimes I use a long pin to encourage the fabric to go in there. Some fabrics like today's went in very easily, but it's got kind of rubberized grippers, and you can see mine are not pulling off. Assuming you don't have huge amounts of tension on the edge, you shouldn't have any trouble with the fabric slipping out. Okay, more. Linda, Susan, could you clarify which bar you attach the backing to? I would love you to do the same as my magnetic bars don't always stay attached. So again, Linda, I'll just point one more time. this is officially the backing bar. Okay, so I've just run my backing over it and I've gone down. You can't really see it, but it's lower in the front. That's supposed to be for the top of the quilt, and I've chosen to use it for the backing. So my backing just flows over this one and around this lower one that's down here. Hopefully that helps. Debbie, what do you have on your spool of thread? Oh, come on, you guys. You're catching me out every time. It is my Fancy Dancy thread sock, and it's a Puma brand. And it literally is a thread sock. I guess thread net is what they're usually called. The thread nets just pull right off because they're so lightweight and they bobble around here on the thread and aren't very helpful. This is actually a lonely sock, and I just cut off the toe and cut off the heel, and it sits around my spool of thread. I've done that for years. It works like a charm. If you want to load this machine the same way that you used to on the Gamble, you can take the pickup leader under the deck. Okay, I'm going to come back to this one and read it after, okay? Because I'm not going to make changes on the fly. But thank you for putting it in. I will come back and ponder through that. It sounds like it's a gooder. So thanks. Mr. Producer's telling me that there's a something. I'll read through it and I'll try the steps. And next show, I'll tell you why it worked or why it didn't. How's that? And one more question, then we'll get quilting. Jeannie, I always forget to put the thread amount back in when I change my bobbin. Don't worry, Susan, the machine will run the bobbin out. Yes, I'm finding this out, Jeannie. You can override it and make it keep stitching, but it does stop and break your top thread when it thinks it's at the end of the bobbin, or at least mine does. Okay, let's get quilting, you guys. The quilting design I've chosen today, because it is a small quilt, is a more closely spaced design than I typically do, because usually it would take too long. Hang on a second. Why are we not getting stitching here? We got to get back in stitching mode. I'm just looking at my screen, just double checking that I'm in all the places I want to be. So it is, I call it irregular fans. It's a bit like a Baptist fan in that the lines, the arcs echo, and it's irregular because it's not in rows like Baptist fans are. So I'm going to do a couple with the stitch regulator on just to get my hand in, and then I'm going to go into non-regulated mode because I do prefer it. And I have to stop talking because I can only do one thing at a time today. So that's the gist of it. Echoing lines, and they're just irregularly spaced, overlapping one over another. But I'm going to go into manual mode, and Mr. Producer's going to put some nice music on, and we're just going to head down and get some stitching done. How does that sound? Don't forget, go ahead and type in your questions. We'll come back to them before the end of the show. I'm going to pause for just a second and ask how everyone's feeling about the light. Give Mr. Producer some feedback on that if you're able to see the stitching okay, and if so, I'll just keep on going. I will mention one thing that you can perhaps see as I'm working. There are some of these intersections are quite thick, quite a few layers of fabric meeting at an intersection, and I am not avoiding those with my stitching. My preference is to stitch them down. If you stitch on both sides of it, it tends to stick up like a button after your quilt is finished. I think it looks much better if they're actually stitched down, so I'm doing my best to stitch on or very nearly on those thick seam allowance crossings. Here's one right here. You can kind of hear the note of the machine change a little bit. It is quite thick. You certainly don't want to be zooming at a super duper high speed over that, or you're apt to break a needle. But I do think it produces a better finished result. My table runner will lay much flatter if I've stitched down those bulky seam allowances. Here's another one. And another. Beautiful. Generally on edge-to-edge work like this, I try really hard to have the area furthest away from me the most quilted, if that makes sense, and the area closest to me to have the more open areas. And I'm kind of breaking my cardinal rule here. You can see I'm leaving areas far away from me unquilted and then kind of backing up into those corners. The reason I'm doing that is because I want my fans to move, to not look like they're all in the same direction. So if I was doing a full-size quilt, I wouldn't worry about it. I would do the next whole pass in the other direction. But because this is a table runner, I want to think about that just a little way, just a little bit. I don't want all the fans to look like they were quilted from one side. Does that all make sense? Beyond that, there's really no rhyme or reason to these fans. I just fit them in to keep my spacing as even as I can, make them bigger or smaller depending on where I want to travel next and what fits in the little area I'm in. But there's no rules to it at all. Whew, let's take a break for a second. Give my neck a break. Okay, apparently a couple of people are saying, let's give a try at the light with it off. So let me figure out how to do that. Just a second. Okay, light is completely off. So we'll give that a try and see how visible it is. I'm just going to get a sip of coffee. I'm feeling a little raspy. And why don't we take a couple of questions? It is kind of a intensive design, and so I do have to stand up and give my neck a break. And if you're quilting at home, I've actually had people email me and say, that does not look good on your neck, you shouldn't do that. My answer to that is I take breaks often. I do not stand and do that for long periods of time. Couple minutes, break. Couple minutes, break. Okay, June Duck. My machine is Stella too, named after my great aunt Estelle, who was the family quilter. Awesome. Sue Donnelly. Dave, it's super simple to add the manual channel locks. So Sue, we do have them, but we can't because we have the belts and the computerized system on. So I hear what you're saying. I do have a set of channel locks. It just involves running around the machine a little bit. And one more of the things I need to learn how to use efficiently, but haven't yet. It takes more than 7 quilts to figure it all out. Christine, so no leader on the top back in your case bar. That, if you mean this bar right here, that is correct. There is no leader on there. It's just a bare bar. Susan Braun, I struggle with basting as I get further down the quilt. My clamps I put on to keep the edges the same length get smaller, or I cannot keep the quilt as wide when I start as I go. You might want to watch some of my other episodes that focus on basting, Susan. I have a couple tips, one of them being to have a tape measure across the top of your quilt that you can standardize the measurement of your quilt as you go down. I really, really, really think basting is your answer to keeping your quilt square. I really do. Christine, any problems sewing right to left? Not so far. I haven't done a lot of straight line things other than the basting, but I've had no trouble so far. More questions? Sue Donnelly, I like the cup foot, adjustable one for this, but not the cup that fits on the number 96 foot. See, I don't even know all that stuff yet. I do have the cup foot, haven't used it. I could certainly see it on a quilt like this. These seams were not so high that I had trouble with my hopper foot bumping them. That's usually the mental trigger to me. If my hopper foot touches them at all, like a t-shirt quilt, put that cup foot on. But I see your point. The cup foot can really help you coast over things smoothly. Susan Hooker, what stitch length are you using? What thread? Good questions. So the very first couple of fans, I had 11 stitches per inch on, and I kind of got that look in my eye, and I'm now stitching in manual mode, meaning the needle is moving at a fixed rate and how fast I move the machine is controlling the stitch length. So I'm trying to make them look like those 11s. Does that make sense? That was my mental gauge. As far as thread, I'm using Isacord 100% poly. It's a 40 weight. In my opinion, it looks like a 50. It's fairly fine. It's a little bit glossy. It's very strong. I love it on my long arm. And I've got kind of a robin's egg blue color. And actually, I should have talked about thread color just a minute, but let's get this question. Dorothy, what's the gadget with the handle fixed behind the needle? Is it, you can't see my fingers. It's this one right here is the presser foot release. So one of the Bernina features is that it uses the same feet as a Bernina sewing machine would, and they change in the same way. You just release that catch and put the new foot on, is my understanding so far. Again, I haven't done a lot of that. Deborah's asking, do the needles have a round shaft or flat like a regular sewing machine? Flat like a regular sewing machine. They are the same needles. They're interchangeable between my sewing machine and my long arm. Karen, Susan, are you not bending down too much to see the needle work? No, I don't think so, Karen. I've actually got my long arm higher than the average person does. I like that feel. I do notice that for you guys, this bar is higher than my other machine, so we might end up lowering it for the purposes of taping because it kind of obstructs your view a little bit. But in general, my method is to have my quilt, it's about 3 or 4 inches higher than the average person would for their quilting height, just because of the style of quilting I do, which is this overall edge to edge. I don't do a ton of ruler work and things like that where I'd want it lower. Jan, does the Bernina feel lighter than the Gamel? It feels very similar for weight. My Gamel was a 26 inch and this is a 24. And I mean, I don't know what the materials are, but it feels very similar for weight. Jacqueline, I wonder if you put a little strip of tenting on your light to help so it's not so concentrated. We probably could. That's kind of built into the light, Jacqueline, diffused, and you can raise and lower them a great deal, and we're down to about 40%. But are you thinking the light on the machine? Maybe that's what you're referring to, Jacqueline. Perhaps I could, but I think that would get in you guys' way for visibility. Joan, so glad Susan Live and Unscripteds are back. Yay! Me and the episodes. I get it. Thank you, Joan. It is very nice to be home. Patricia would like to see this quilting pattern in more detail in advance. Let's just take 1 second here to talk about a couple of my offerings, Patricia, that will answer your question. So I have 2 main teaching platforms. One is a full-length course that has over 30 designs. It is a paid course. There are 6 modules in it, many designs, and this is one of them, and it is in that course. So some of you who are here today are students from that course, and so you've seen this in more depth and detail. What Patricia's referring to is my monthly subscription membership. That's called Advance, for people who want more designs, more quilting, bite-sized pieces. It does not have any of the designs that are in that masterclass. I'm kind of keeping them special for that. There are other designs in the Advance membership. So you won't be seeing this one in advance, Patricia, but pick up whatever tips you can here. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. There's still time to share this with your friends or share it before the next episode. Again, the 1st and 3rd Friday of each month, I air these. I really try to get a newsletter out a couple days in advance with a photograph of what I'm going to be working on and what some of the topics will be, too. Megan is asking, does Bernina have a ruler plate too? Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Sandy, is your cup foot clear? I have one and wondered if it might help with vision as well as moving over seams. Yes, the cup foot is acrylic for this machine, and I do like that feature. It's quite nice to be able to see underneath or through that foot. Okay, that's it for questions. One more sip of my magic elixir. Okay, I was going to talk just a second about the thread. Can we have a look at the quilt again, Dave, please? That'll be fine. You can see on this little runner, there's kind of a mixture of colors. We've got a pale aqua, we've got a mid blue and a gray, and a darker blue, dark green, cream. quite a range of colors. You know, thread, I always say, ask any two quilters and you'll get 3 opinions about thread choices, but this is my thread philosophy. When I'm doing an edge-to-edge design like this, ideally, I want the thread to show up similarly on all of the fabrics, and they range from cream all the way to navy. How am I going to do that? I wouldn't pick the cream because it would disappear on the cream and show up on the navy. I wouldn't pick the navy. I would pick something more middle of the road. And today you can kind of see my spool up here. I'm using a robin's egg blue, which actually is not even in this quilt. But I spooled, you know, a little puddle of thread on it, and it blended nicely with all of the colors. It's a bit darker than the aqua. Obviously, it's lighter than the navy. So it's just a blend, and I like that look for an edge-to-edge design because you kind of see the same amount of it on all of the fabrics. So that's what I chose today. Okay. Excuse me. Mr. Producer is telling me there's tons and tons of questions about Lucy, which was my previous long arm. Let's have a couple of them. Okay. You want me straight on for a moment? Okay, so apparently a lot of you, I so appreciate that you guys keep coming back and watching, by the way. I feel like we're just old friends here, which is wonderful. But lots of you are asking about Lucy, my previous long arm. Clearly, I love to name my long arms because we spend a lot of time together. Lucy is still here. She is for sale. I just haven't gotten around to getting the photographs up and getting her listed. You'll probably see her in the next week or two, like in some Facebook groups and things like that. But if any of you are interested, she is for sale. It's a Gamble 26-inch. It does have the Elevate system, and I'll just leave it at that. Email me if you'd like more details, info@stitchedbysusan.com, and we can talk about that. Okay. I'm just talking with Mr. Producer off screen. A lot of you are asking kind of the why of why I've switched brands. I'll give you a couple of my reasons. There are multiple ones, but one of the top ones was I'm interested in stretching myself as a quilter and in learning some new techniques. I love doing this kind of edge-to-edge couch quilt type of quilting. That is my love, and I don't think that's ever going to change. But I've done a lot of it. I think I've done 1,100 and some quilts without a computerized system, like all freehand. I love it, but I want to stretch myself. I want to learn some new things and try some new techniques. Among them is yarn couching. And I wanted a machine that had the capability of using different weights and fibers and types of yarns and get into some fun artistic things like that. Another thing the Bernina offers, because I use sewing machine needles, I can put a twin or a triple needle on my long arm and do some decorative stitching. So I wanted to play with some of those artistic elements. So that was one of my criteria in looking for a new machine, was one that did this fine kind of artistic work. So I do want to underline, I had no problems with my Gamble. It was a great machine. It is a great machine. It's very serviceable. It's quite industrial. It's easy to maintain on your own. There's lots of good qualities. But I wanted to explore and try some other things. And then the clincher, frankly, was that Bernina offered me an opportunity to travel on their event team and present in retail shops and at quilt shows. And that is a golden opportunity for me. I've never traveled to very many quilt shows. I've not met a lot of quilters in person, and I really want to. So when they offered me that opportunity, it really spoke to me. And of course, if I'm representing them, I need to drive one of their machines, right? So that was a big factor in the decision as well. So it's not a right or a wrong. You know, among the major long arm brands, each one of them has their own superpower, if you will. And each one of them has things they don't have. So it's not, like I said earlier, it's not weighing one against another. It's apple and oranges. Some have this feature, some have that. Love the one you drive is what I'm thinking. So those were some of my reasons for changing machines. And just the process of changing a machine, honestly, is a stretch too. And you'll hear me say this in various places. My word for 2023 is stretch. I even took up a yoga membership to like play on that word and stretch a little more. But I think it's good to not get too static. And we do it in different ways, don't we? And here I'm rambling down a rabbit trail, but we each do it in different ways. But for me, In my art, in my craft, it felt like a good time to stretch into just learning something new, getting familiar with a different machine, becoming more knowledgeable about features and options and those sorts of things. So all of that came into play. Let's get back to quilting. Let us know how this light works for you, by the way, this light level. Okay, we're on manual stitch mode. Here we go. Are you seeing how when I stitch over those super bulky intersections where the triangles all come together, they just lay down so much more smoothly? The truth of it is, you don't really notice in the finished product when a quilter does that. But for me anyway, I really notice when a quilter does not do that, because they catch your eye when they stick up like little buttons. They catch the light and they're just so noticeable. We could go a long ways with that. There's other things in life that nobody notices when you do them, but if you don't do them, am I right? But I won't go too far down that rabbit trail. We are nearing the end, so if you have any more questions about this project, now's the time. If you're an Instagram user, I posted a little reel yesterday. Excuse me. Talking about the advantages of stitching in manual mode, but actually using the regulator to monitor how well you're doing. So in my little reel, I had the stitch regulator on, and I was using the motor sound to gauge and to smooth out my quilting. So you might find that of interest if this is something that you have not done before. Stitching in manual mode, that's a good place to start. Just learning how to smooth out your pace. And we're finished. Should we do a quick pan over the quilt, Dave, and then take some questions? Let's see if I can find, here's one good example of stitching right over that super bulky seam allowance. Here's one where I got close but not quite on it. So that's it. Oh yeah, and here's one to end on, one that I didn't manage to stitch down super well, and it kind of shows. But that's only one in the scheme of things. Okay, I'll move Stella to the side. We'll chat for a few minutes. So again, I'd love if you would hit that like button, subscribe, share, all those good things. We do air these live and unscripted episodes the first and third Friday of each month. It is most commonly me doing a whole project from start to finish, usually including the loading. As I get that process more streamlined, I will show that too, because I know that is something that is really helpful to see how other people load their quilts. So some of my favorite tools, and I won't get into all of them today, I try to highlight different things in different episodes. Certainly you can find past episodes. We're up to, I don't know, about 60, I guess. So you can find past episodes with lots of different topics and types of quilting. So let's take some questions. Let me get my coffee in hand so I can be sipping. Sandy, VG Quilting on Facebook has several loading videos for the Bernina longarm. Okay, good to know. I'll be honest and upfront, and I'll talk to Bernina about this too. I've already veered off of their recommended way of doing it, right? I'm looking for the way that's most efficient for me. So that's kind of what I'm interested in. So that's why I want to hear from you guys that have machines, if you've found nifty ways of doing it. Betsy, just when I think I figured out your path, you change. Could you do the path with your finger and talk through your thought process? Betsy, there's no rhyme or reason to it. Those fans go every which direction, and there's no start to the right or start to the left at all. I just start with a little hump and trace an echo and try to keep the spacing relatively similar. That's it. All it is. Christine, will you be at QuiltCon in Atlanta? Christine, I will not. My hope is to be next year at QuiltCon. I won't be this year. I'm traveling the weekend before and the weekend after, so I'm staying home the one in between. Mary, is this machine quieter? It seems to be much quieter. I don't notice that it is, but a few people have commented on that, so maybe it comes through on camera more quietly. Sure, you guys are probably a better judge of that than I am. Donna, is there any formula to how many arcs before moving on to a different fan? There's absolutely not. That is just how big a space I'm trying to fill and which direction I'm trying to travel next. 2 to probably 5 or 6 is the most, because the bigger they get, the harder it is to echo, right? So I don't go too huge. Megan, Susan, I noticed that the foot isn't exactly a 1/2 inch wide, so how do you determine where the line you are forward following will be run? In terms of these fans, like there's no measurement. I'm just using the ruler foot just as a bit of a guide for my eye to gauge, what's wide, what's skinny. And I'm not trying to hit a perfect 1/4 inch. These are much more like 3/8, almost half, some of them. So, Christine, lovely fabric. Do you know the name of the line? I'm sorry, I don't. And I don't have any selvage edges in this, so I'm sorry, I don't. Jan, will you bind that little guy? I will not bind this little guy. My personal method for my clients is that I take this, I have a table in a side room with a big cutting mat on it, and I take it with a long straight edge and trim it up, ready to bind. And I do that as part of my service. Silly Sally, is your next masterclass on the calendar yet? Yes, it is. Doors open. Now you're stretching my brain. It's late April, and the first class drops April 28, but I think the doors open for signups on April 20. There will be workshops and things leading up to it, so if you're following me at all on social media or even in my newsletter, you'll get an advance notification of that. There will be workshops and free things leading up to it, quite a lot. Mary Buckley, the fabric is by Bonnie and Camille. Thanks, Mary. You're a trooper. Yes, it does look very Camille-like, doesn't it? Sandy, I'm having trouble leveling my frame on my Berber carpet. Is yours on carpet? Yes, it is. And mine's a higher pile even than Berber. We have, excuse me, about that. We used a long level. I'm looking at it on my side. It's a 4-foot level, I would say. And we leveled in all kinds of places on the frame. And after I got stitching, we had to adjust in the middle area. So I set Stella at various places on the rail. Like, would she sit still and rest, or did she migrate, So that's how we leveled it. Megan, do you currently have the ruler foot in place? No, I don't have the ruler foot on. And I typically don't when I'm doing freehand work, because it limits how close you can quilt to the front bar, right? Because it bumps against. So I usually have it off. Pam, what color thread did you use to quilt the quilt behind you? Let me look, Pam. It's one of, Dave's telling me it's not straight anymore. Trust him to notice. It's one of the deeper tans. So a little deeper tan than what is in most of this background. Does that make sense? Again, it's my idea of kind of blending. I did not use the lightest shade. I used one of these darker shades of tan. That's what it is across all the reds. Megan, oh my God, you guys are phenomenal. So much so I even have my husband on hold. Oh, I'm just so flattered. So flattered, seriously. That's great. Well, thanks you guys for joining. I will go back into the chat and try and catch any questions that I didn't catch on air. I'll do my best. It can be difficult sometimes to find them after the fact, so I will do my best. But thank you so much for coming. Again, we'll be back the 1st and 3rd Friday of each month. What have we talked about? The membership. Email me if you want more information. I haven't mentioned my podcast, which also was on hiatus while I was away. There was just too much toddler wrangling going on. So this coming Wednesday, January 28th, I think. I'm not sure the date. Anyway, it's coming back in late January, and we'll be back to our weekly schedule. So this next kind of series is going to focus a bit on business building. Some of it is just me. Some of it is interviews with people who have turned their hobby or their craft into a business, and how they did it and maybe why they did it, and some suggestions for you. And of course, the usual pins and needles and things, tips that are in it. So podcast is Measure Twice, Cut Once. You can find it in all your favorite podcast places. And let's see, if you want more information on the masterclass or details of these episodes before they're aired, what the project will be, what some of the topics will be, sign up for my newsletter. Easiest way to do that is just go to my website, stitchedbysusan.com, and at some point you'll get a little boop boop, sign up for the newsletter, a little pop-up, and you can do it there. So thanks again for joining me. It's been a real pleasure to be back with you all. Whatever you're doing today, I hope you enjoy it. See you next time.